everyone, and welcome to Cassie's Kitchen Creations. Again, my name is Cassandra. Today I will be baking a cold oven pound cake. Now, growing up, my grandparents used to always bake pound cakes and they weren't a favorite of mine. But over the years, I've taken like an old-fashioned pound cake recipe that my grandmother had and I've modified it, and I actually have grown to like pound cakes. So I have a whole lot of recipes when it comes to pound cakes because I've played around with just about all of them. I have a old-fashioned pound cake, I have a cold oven pound cake recipe, I have a sour cream pound cake recipe, a cold oven sour cream pound cake recipe, I have an orange juice pound cake recipe, a chocolate pound cake recipe, just whatever you could think of. I have a nectar pound cake recipe, which these will be upcoming in some of the future bakes. But I've kind of over the years played with recipes. I've even dealt with fresh fruit, incorporate those in my recipes. I have one that's peaches. I call it peaches and cream. I have another one that's an apple pie that tastes just like an apple pie that comes out of the oven. So, you know, I've kind of tweaked a lot of them and modified them and made them my own creations. So today, before we start baking, I would like to share a scripture with you. It comes from James chapter 4, verse 10, which is also on the t-shirt that I'm wearing. It says, "Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up." And there's no need to elaborate. We'll just end that one by saying amen. Okay? So, on the bake, I have pre-measured most of the ingredients that I'm going to need. So the first thing is that you're going to need 3 cups of sugar, which I've already measured out and I placed in my blender. Okay? You're going to need 1 cup of buttermilk, which I have already allowed to come to room temperature. You're going to need a cup of butter, which I've also allowed to come to room temperature. Here, 1 stick of butter is a half a cup of butter, so 2 sticks will make 1 cup. I also use Orgo baking powder, which is about 1/4 of a teaspoon. I also use the Arm & Hammer baking soda, which is about 1/4 of a teaspoon. I've used white lily flour, the all-purpose flour, and I've already incorporated all of my dry ingredients into the bowl here, into my stainless steel bowl. And with the flour mixture, the dry ingredient mixture, you can sift these ingredients, you can stir these ingredients with a fork, you can whisk the ingredients, or you can just pull it straight out of the bag and use it. I usually whisk my flour because I use the all-purpose flours, and I keep my flour in the refrigerator, so I whisk it so that I don't have any clumps in it. Okay? With the buttermilk, as I said, I just measure out 1 cup of buttermilk, place it in a measuring cup, transfer it to this cup, which says, "With the Lord all things are possible." Taken from Mark chapter 19, verse 26. I allow this to come to room temperature as well. I use Crisco all vegetable shortening, which I've already measured out 1 cup, ready to go in the blender. And I also use vanilla flavor. This is the pure vanilla from Watkins. I only use Watkins flavors. Right. For the bake, I also use a Nordic Ware Bundt cake pan. I use a lot of the Wilson and the Nordic Ware products. I have these in every design. I have a heart for Valentine's Day. I have an Easter bunny for Easter. I have a 4-leaf clover for St. Patrick's Day. I also have wreaths and a lot of the Christmas decorations, like the Christmas balls, the Christmas wreaths, Santa Claus. I have all of those as well. And these are cast iron. With this one, I will pre-treat the pan completely with Pam baking, and this is baking with made with flour. And there's a twist that I do with my pound cakes. I will coat the pans very well, including the flute that's on the inside. And then once I do that, I will sprinkle just a little sugar around it so that it releases very well from the pan, and also it leaves a very crispy, crunchy coating on the cake. It's really, really good. The crust of it is really good. And I've had a lot of compliments. People ask me, how do I get my cake so crunchy? But I don't have it crunchy. It's just enough crunch to it to add a little bit more flavor. Right? So now, as I said, it's a cold oven, so I do not set the temperature of the oven. That's what cold oven means. I'm going to be baking this cake for 1.5 hours at 300 degrees Celsius. Again, it's cold oven, so I won't set my temperature until I place the cake in the oven. And the reason that we like to use cold ovens to bake pound cakes is because the cold oven gives you a longer cooking time and a lower temperature. And what that does as far as impacting the cake is that the process that we call leavening, it's going to allow the leavening to work longer. It's going to take a longer time for it to actually go through the leavening process. So that actually happens before the cake sets. And then, of course, once the cake sets, the result is that you're going to get a taller and you're going to get a fluffier cake. That's why we use the cold oven, all right, for anyone who's inquired. All right, so with that being stated, let's get on with the bake. As I said, I have already measured 3 cups of granulated sugar, and I use Domino sugar. And I also use some organic sugars for cakes that I bake for myself. But since this is for someone else, it's going to be 3 cups of granulated cane sugar. Right. Then I'm going to place 1 cup, again, which is 2 sticks of butter, which have been allowed to come to room temperature. Now, if you forget to take your butter out and allow it to come to room temperature, you can always place it in the microwave on about 10 seconds. You don't want to melt it in the microwave. You just want to heat it up so that it becomes soft. You can do that. So I've added my sugar, I've added my butter. Now I like to add 1 cup of shortening to the blender as well, and I've already pre-measured, so this will be, a half a cup of shortening, half a cup of shortening. And I'm just going to scoop this out and add it to the blender. Okay, so now that I have this all added to my blender, I'm going to turn this on, and as I turn it on, I'm going to turn it on really slow. And I'm going to allow the sugar, the butter, and the shortening to become very creamy. Usually 2 to 3 minutes, no more than 4 minutes should take the time it should take for this to actually cream. So I'm going to plug in my KitchenAid blender, and then I'm going to place it on low. Allow it to cream with all 3 of these mixing together. And once it seems like the consistency is getting to where I want it to be, I will slowly turn up the blender so that I can beat it to get the fluffiness and the creaminess that I really want. And while this is blending, I'm going to get 5 eggs that I'm going to add one at a time to my batter. Slightly and just allow it to blend. And to the sugar, the butter, and the shortening, I'm going to add 5 eggs. I use the brown eggs from the Rhode Island Red Chickens, but you can use regular white eggs from your grocery. So I'm going to crack these, and I'm going to add them one by one. And as you add them one by one, once the yolk part is mixed in, blended with your sugar, your butter, and your shortening, then you can add the second, third, fourth, and the 5th egg. Then in the end, I will give it a really good beat to make sure that the eggs are mixed in very well. So I will add my first egg. Now I'll add the second egg. And it's really good to add the eggs one by one, because you're making sure that the yolk is broken on each one and that they all blend in, so that you don't have those like thick streaks of batter in the cake once it bakes, where it looks like it's the egg all coming together. And also, egg is added for consistency purposes to hold now my last egg, which is the 5th egg. And now that all the eggs have been added, I'm going to speed it up just a little on the blender, just to make sure that they get mixed well. Beat it too long. You just want to make sure that you don't see any of the yolk streaks in your mixture, that you just see the yellow tint that it adds to your sugar, butter, and shortening. So I think that's mixed pretty well, because in the end I will beat it for about 5 minutes. So the next thing you want to do is that you want to add your dry ingredients, right? So I've already measured out 3 cups of all-purpose flour, white lily. I've added the 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, the 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. And also I will add the butter that I use is unsalted butter. Make sure that if you use butter that it is unsalted with your pound cakes, not the salted. A lot of people do add about 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt to their pound cakes. I do not. I just simply use all-purpose flour, baking soda, and baking powder. Right. So I have added those ingredients and I've mixed them well, and they're sifted in this stainless steel bowl. And I have my 1 cup of buttermilk already measured. So at this point, I am going to add alternating 1 cup of the dry ingredient mix, which is my flour, baking soda, and baking powder. And then I'm going to add 1/2 of a cup of buttermilk. And then the last one is going to be flour. So when you add your dry ingredients and the buttermilk, you start with flour and you end with the flour, okay? So you add 1 cup of flour, 1/2 a cup of buttermilk, another cup of flour, the second half a cup of buttermilk, and then you'll add your last cup of flour, okay? So we'll go ahead and add our first cup here of the flour. And when you add the flour, when you turn your blender on, you want to make sure that you turn the blender on low at first, because if not, you'll have flour going in everywhere. You have a flour bath, as they call it. So we'll start it very slow, because at this point, we just want to mix the flour into the cream, sugar, butter, shortening, and the eggs that were added. So we just want to mix it in. And as you see, the flour is not resting on the sides. I kind of tap my bowl a little and it falls down, and then I'll turn the speed up just slightly. So right now I'm on 2, so I work between 1 and 2 on my blender. 1 is where I start when I mix. 2 is when I want to make sure it gets a really good mix before I add the next ingredient. And then in the last step, I'm going to ramp it up to 3 to make sure that everything is mixed well before I place it in the oven. And then I'll also straighten down the sides of the bowl and also the bottom of my bowl. So this is mixed very well. So now I will add my 1/2 a cup of buttermilk to this. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to estimate here about 1/2. But nonetheless, about 1/2 a cup. Then I'll turn it on low to blend the buttermilk in. I'm going to ramp up the speed just slightly. So between 1 and 2 is what I'm working here. Alright. So now I'm going to add my 2nd cup of dry ingredients, which is the flour mix. Again, I'll place my blender on 1 just to make sure that the flour mixes in and I don't end up with a flour bath. I'm going to ramp it up to 2. Make sure I get a really good mix. I want that flour to be consistent. Now I'm going to add the second half of the buttermilk. Again, it's a whole cup is what you need. You add it 1/2 a cup at a time, alternating between the buttermilk and the flour. Right? Make sure I got all of the buttermilk in there. Okay. So then we're going to place it again on one. Allow it to mix. Ramp it up to 2. And now I'm going to add my last cup of dry ingredients. I have a little left in my bowl here. I'm just going to tilt this over and allow it to flow in. All right. So now, again, I'll start it at 1 just to get a really good mix on it. Now wrap it up to 2. And now I will add my vanilla flavor. Again, I use the Watkins baking vanilla, the pure vanilla. So I will turn my speed down just slightly. And it's 1 teaspoon of vanilla. But, you know, it's optional for you. I'm going to add about 1.5. Depends on your taste. But the actual recipe calls for like 1 teaspoon. I'm going to ramp this up to 2. Make sure everything's mixed in well. Okay. Now, I will say, if you don't have buttermilk, if it's not something that's on your list when you go to the grocery store, then you can just take a cup of whole milk and add 1 teaspoon of distilled white vinegar to it, and then that gives you the buttermilk as well. But I use buttermilk not just for baking cakes. I use it for making yeast rolls, biscuits, even in my cornbread. So I have multiple use for the buttermilk. But if it's not something that's on your grocery list, of course, you can always improvise by just simply taking a cup of whole milk, whether it's organic or just your regular whole milk from the store, adding 1 teaspoon of distilled white vinegar, and there you go. You have buttermilk. All right. So now, what I'm going to do is get my spatula. I'm going to scrape down the sides of the bowl, and I'm also going to mix it a little and release what's on the bottom. And then I'm going to blend it for roughly about 5 minutes. I don't want to beat it too hard or too long. I just want to do it about 5 minutes to make sure that everything is well mixed. So I just scrape the sides of the bowl. Because, you know, sometimes your flour can kind of cling to the bowl. It doesn't really mix. You sometimes have just a little. So I usually just scrape the sides of the bowl really good, all the way down. Make sure everything gets mixed in. Kind of loosen up what's on the bottom of your bowl, like the sugar. Sometimes sugar and the butter and the shortening mixture will kind of rest on the sides and don't really get a good mix. And you don't realize it until you're adding the cake to the cake plate or to your cake pan for the bake. So I'm just gonna scrape the sides down really good. Add it all back to the bowl. Okay. So now I've released everything. It appears that there's nothing clinging. Everything seems to be mixing very, very, very well, which is a positive. So we've gotten everything in the bowl. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my blender, and I'm going to ramp it up to from 1 to 2 to 3. And at 3, I'm going to let it blend for about 5 minutes. I'm going to place you guys on a quick pause, and I'll rejoin you after the 5 minutes. All right, so our 5 minutes is up, and I will turn the blender off. I'll lift it and I allow this to kind of fall off into my pan. and I kind of help it out a little. I remember growing up, we had those old beaters long before all this technology. It was just the 2 beaters, and you would take them off, and everybody in the house, all of the kids and even the adults, they want to lick the beaters. Once my mom or my grandma or my great-grandmother had finished baking, mixing up a cake. But of course, in these days, we don't do that. Okay, so I've released everything. So I'll take off my beater, place it in my sink to wash. Okay. And now I'm ready to add my cake to the baking pan. Right? So what I do with the baking pan, and as I said earlier, I use the Nordic ware, and it is a bundt pan, bundt style. Okay. I'm going to coat the pan with Pam bacon. And this one is bacon with flour. And also, I'm going to add just a little bit of sugar to it, all right? So, I take the pan and I spray my pan very, very well. Because this is the key to your cake being able to be released from the pan and not clinging to the pan after it's cool. And I make sure that I get this flute very well coated as well, because I don't want the interior of my cake to cling either. I want it to come out and I want it to be nice and beautiful. And if you look on the image that I posted for the channel, that is the cake that I baked, that I show how pretty it is when it comes out of the pan. Then I'll take just a little sugar, these sugar crystals, and I will also, a lot of times people coat their pans with shortening, or they can use flour, and then you use butter and flour. I use the baking by Pam, and the baking spray by Pam, and I also have another baking spray that I use as well. And then I just take a little bit of sugar and I kind of sprinkle it around in the pan, and this helps the cake. And I also make sure I do the flute too, and this helps the cake to be released from the pan, and it also puts a nice crispy crunch to the cake when it comes out, which like I said at the beginning, I get a lot of compliments on. Right? All right, so now I'm ready to add my cake batter to the pan. So I'll just twist it to release it. Give it a good mix. And then I will allow it to flow in the pan. Now, what I do is, and this is my kitchen, I just go around in a circle in the pan, to each his own. Some people just add it, they scrape it from the bowl and place it in the pan. I kind of allow it to fold into my Nordic ware baking bundt pan. And then when it stops flowing, I just scrape down the sides and add it to the bundt pan. Okay. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just personal preference. A lot of the things we do in our kitchens is things that we were taught or that we observed parents, our mom, our grandparents doing, and we've just become accustomed to do it as well as over the years. You know, meeting people and traveling and learning different ways and different cultures, and then coming back and applying it to our kitchens. So again, everything we do from learned behavior. All right, so I think I've gotten it clean pretty good. You know, you're not going to get all of it, of course, but it's enough to bake to make a cake, of course. All right, so with that being said, I then take my wooden spoon and I kind of go around the tops, because I kind of give it a cute little design so when it cooks or bakes, nothing spectacular. I just make like little whirl circles around it. Okay. Now that I've done that, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tap it on the counter, because I would like to remove air bubbles from my cake. And also I give it like a little twist, because I want the cake to be level in the pan so that it doesn't bake lopsided. It bakes consistently. Okay, so I kind of twist it a little, and then I'll tap it a couple of times. Usually do about 10. Give it another good twist. Tap. And what the tapping does is that it releases the air bubbles or the air pockets that's trapped within the cake, so that when you slice the cake, you don't see gaps in it. Seems like it was a hole or something should have been there. It allows it to remove those air pockets and air bubbles. Okay, I don't see any more popping. So now I will open my oven, and I'm going to place the cake in the oven on the lowest rack. And I'll twist my pan to make sure that the pan sits flush in the oven. A lot of people don't worry about it, but I kind of place it in there and I kind of move the pan until it settles in position, so I know that it's not going to be a lopsided cake. All right, so the next thing I want to do is, remember, this is a cold oven pound cake. So now I want to set my oven temperature. All right, so I'm going to press bake. And with this one, I'm going to bake it at 300 degrees Fahrenheit. 300, and then I'm going to bake it for 1.5 hours. So now I can press start, allow the oven to come to temperature with the cake in it. Again, using a cold oven to bake a pound cake, the objective is that you're going to end up with a taller and fluffier cake, because you're going to have a lower temperature and a longer baking time. And that allows the leavening process to actually, take place before the cake sets. And then you get the moist and fluffy cake in the end, which is the results that I'm always going for. So what it does is, as a cold oven, it actually affects the texture of the cake. So you're going to get a better texture. Okay, so that's it for the prep and the oven. It's going to take about 1.5 hours for the cake to bake. I'm going to place you on a pause. I'll pick you back up when I take the cake out of the oven, and then we're ready to allow it to cool and transfer it to the cake plate. I'll see you in about 1.5 hours. Okay guys, our 1.5 hours is up. So now I'm going to remove the cake from the oven, and I'm going to place it on the rack and allow it to cool. This is what the cake looks like coming out of the oven. It's beautiful. And as you can see on the sides, it's already released from the pan. That's from the sugar crystals that I actually sprinkle the pan with sugar. So I'm going to sit it here, and I'm going to place it on the rack, and I'm going to let it cool roughly for about 10 minutes. And then I'm going to transfer it to my cake pan. So I'll pick you up once it's cooled. Okay, I have released the cake from the cake pan that I baked it in. As you can see, it has the bump style. Came out of the pan, it released very well. I know you can't see it through the camera, but there's a lot of little crystals on it. It's where the sugar, kind of like caramelized, I guess you could say. And it helps it to release easily from the pan. Beautiful cake. I'm going to sit it on my counter and continue to allow it to cool. While the cake was cooling, I went ahead and made like a glaze to put on it. This glaze is 2 cups of powdered sugar, and I used 2.5 tablespoons of milk, and I used whole milk. However, you can use whole milk, 2% milk. You can use half and half heavy whipping cream, or you can use evaporated milk. Whichever one you have available, that is the one that you can use. I used whole milk, and then I used 1 teaspoon of vanilla flavor, and I added in roughly about 1/4 of a teaspoon of organic lemon flavor. Again, it was vanilla, which is pure vanilla flavor. It's not the imitation, and I also use, it's organic, and I also use the organic vanilla lemon. Sorry. So I mixed it until I got it to the consistency that I would like for it to cling to the cake. As you can see, it's not too runny. If you add 2 tablespoons of milk and that's too thick for you, you can always add another tablespoon of milk to thin it out. If it appears that it's too thin, then you can add a little bit more confectioner's sugar to it to thicken it up. So I've already mixed this very well, and so once the cake cools, I'm going to add the glaze to it, and then it'll be ready to deliver to my client. Okay, so I'm going to put you on a pause right quick, wait on it to cool, and I'll pick you back up when it's time to put the icing on, or the glaze on. Hello, I'm back with the finished cake. I did the glaze and I drizzled it onto the cake, and now it is complete and ready to be delivered. Okay. Thank you for watching. If there's anything that you would like to bake and you're unsure of, send me an email at cassieskitchencreations@gmail.com. I will do it as a video presentation, and I will do it step by step. And the masterpiece will be completed, and then you can follow along. All right. Again, if you like any of the recipes, send me an email. I will forward them to you. Also, if you like the videos, please click the like button, which is the thumb up. Subscribe to my channel, and also click the notification and click all, so that whenever I have a new video posted of a new bake or a new kitchen creation or something that I'm cooking or preparing, you'll be notified and you can get in on it as early as possible. Again, thanks for watching, and you guys have a great rest of the weekend.